Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. I'm going to share some information about the curriculum improvement cycle. I hope it's helpful. I'll have a break after the presentation, and if there are further questions, and I've got a couple of questions for you to explore today or to come back to and meet again and follow up with. So I'm going to talk through, to start with, why we have the curriculum improvement cycle, the work that's going on, and where we are now with the work in November. I'll hopefully talk a wee bit about what it means, and then my questions for today or for next time are really about how we connect and work together in the next bit. So the start of this work, or why we're having the curriculum improvement cycle, is the OECD report in 2021 that said curriculum for excellence is the right curriculum for Scotland, but we needed to update it. So they'd suggested we should do lots of things, but one of them was put a cycle of curriculum improvement in place so that we had a system to bring the curriculum up to date and keep it up to date as we go forward. They also suggested we might want to do something about the position of knowledge in the curriculum and make clearer the link between knowledge and skills and the knowledge that children can expect to learn. So that was one report. We know we've had lots of reports in Scottish education over the last few years. Other reports have got some information and recommendations about curriculum too. So the KenU report there had recommendations from young people about the curriculum, but that was heavily focused on structures in education. The skills report talked a lot about post-school pathways and skills and pathways beyond the age of 16. The National Discussion Report had a call to action. It had a lot about well-being, a lot about diversity in the curriculum, and some good information from young people about what they wanted to learn. The review of assessment talked about a different way of doing qualifications at the end of school, and that included project learning and learning in a personal pathway. And the review of CLD, community learning and development, had a lot about structures and funding, but also just highlighted the importance of the role of community educators for everybody in Scotland, children and young people and adults as well. So the curriculum improvement cycle isn't going to action all of the recommendations, but we hope it can make a contribution towards some of the things that have come up and take us from having reports into action and change that will move us forward as a country. And it might, if we get it right, create the space or get some of the bumps out of the road to be able to take forward some of the other bigger things in the reports too. Work was done then to work out what should a curriculum improvement cycle look like. So this is based on learning from other countries and from research. That means we've got 4 phases. So this is a 10-year cycle with 4 bits to it. And right now we're in this second phase here. So the first phase of reviewing the evidence and feedback about what's working, we've had that. We've had lots and lots of reports over the last few years, and all of that's been analysed to give us lots of different recommendations. We're now in this phase of engaging with that and co-creating the next version of Scotland's curriculum. I've got a slide later that will show the timelines. After this phase, the next phase is about sharing, learning and adopting. So that's once the new curriculum has been created, we go into a space so we can learn, share, try new things, have professional learning to build on all of that. And then the last phase is the monitoring and evaluating impact. So thinking, again, looking for evidence about what's working so that that then goes in and informs the next phase. And it's a 10-year cycle. So we had the national discussion, and the suggestion is every 10 years, we have a big national exercise like that to take stock of where we are. Important to say though, we're not starting from nothing, and we are not throwing everything out. We know there's a lot of good happens in Scottish schools and in Scottish education, and this is about evolving or building on that, not completely starting again. So the main bits of our curriculum framework are staying. The 4 capacities, everyone agrees, all of those reports agree that these are the right purposes for going to school. That education in Scotland should help you be an individual, help you learn to be and feel what it is to be a citizen, to understand the contribution you can make, and to develop as a learner as well. So all our main 4 capacities stay. Also, what stays in the what column, so the middle column there, the 4 contexts for learning. And they stay, and we're expecting them to be strengthened. We know we've got better at things like interdisciplinary learning. Schools function more and more like communities now, and there's lots of good practice to draw on and help us all be better in those areas. And the curriculum making model, so the how, also stays. And that's still quite new, but we're seeing that the model, those 5 parts and all the resources that sit under them help people and are having a good impact on how people make curriculum for and with children. Other good things that are happening in Scotland, realising the ambition. So the national practice guidance for early years, we know, is really strong. That part of the reason that's strong is because it's got lots of what we know about child development and curriculum together. And we know we've not done that for primary schools, and we've not done that for secondary schools. The same too, these documents bottom left are the Building a Curriculum series. Some of that's out of date, some of it should stay. So they will all be updated into one new overarching guidance that will bring the best bits of what we know about child development and the best bits that we know about pedagogy and curriculum together into the overarching curriculum guidance for Scotland. And again, the rights-based approach has been really strengthened nationally and in schools and settings. So that's another thing that stays and that we want to build on. Another recommendation from the OECD was about the words we use in Scottish education, that we can often use the same word but mean different things. So they advised us to develop shared meanings or definitions of key terms that would be important to review the curriculum. Some of these are here. There's a document that has the definitions. They're working definitions because in this work we are finding the more work we do, we have to go back and think again about the definitions as we learn. So now on slide 10, and this has one of the definitions of pedagogy, and it talks about interactions, experiences, spaces, and time. As an example. Important to say, what we are focusing on is the technical framework. So the third column at the moment is the bit that's changing. Experiences and outcome documents, benchmarks, course specifications. That's where the work is on the technical framework. The other frameworks, things like the law about the number of days a school is open, 2 periods of PE, all of that, that's not changing. The focus is on the technical framework. So really, we're talking about the documents that teachers use day to day in planning learning. We're making sure that we don't do this on our own. Last time, it was a very small number of people did the curriculum review. So there are 2,000 practitioners involved in different groups. We've got small groups of about 30 people who are doing the writing, and they have a focus on a curriculum area. So there is a core group for maths, a core group for English, and so on. We've got a larger group of called a collaboration group. That's about 100 people who are checking and testing and coming up with ideas for that smaller group. And we have steering groups, and the steering group is about creating the enabling environment or the conditions. So that's with people like directors of education, teacher training. We did some pilot curriculum reviews, and they were some consistent messages came out of that. The biggest thing was about clutter or decluttering. So the curriculum being really complicated and trying to streamline and make things easier for teachers and practitioners. There was another message about clarity, and that people wanted a clearer curriculum in many ways. But not too much prescription. Teachers still want to be able to plan learning in ways that suit the children they're working with. We're also building on lots of exciting things that are happening. So some trends, we know lots of people are looking at things like outdoor learning, project learning, equalities, lots of opportunities for children to lead their own learning and explore questions they want to explore. And lots of work about skills and getting children to think about their skills and help them to see the skills they're developing. So that's all factored into. So the focus of the change is about understanding and moving towards a model that looks like this, where we're clearer about what children should learn to know and do and understand. And this diagram is a knot because we know these are all connected. You can't have one without the other. Skills and knowledge and understanding come together, sometimes in different ways, but all connected. And overall, what this review is trying to do is have a curriculum that has got clarity with flexibility, not too much prescription, so that every child is learning the same thing on exactly the same day in the country, but not too much openness so that teachers are unsure their class is making progress alongside children of the same age. Next little bit is about timescales and timings. So this is slide 17 in the pack. In June, Scottish Government published this document, which was an update on the curriculum, qualifications and assessment reform. And the positive there is about all of these things being together in the same document, curriculum and qualifications being together. This has included a timeline, but the timeline is quite difficult to read. So here is the main information about the time. So at the moment, we are in the co-creation phase, and that lasts until the summer. That's with the groups working to develop the draft curriculum framework and the draft guidance. That should be available to everyone from June, but it's not formally adopted until August 2028. So we have 2 years to prepare and 2 years to make the transition. And that's when August 28th, so children who are currently in P6 will be in S2, and children currently who are in S1 will be in S4. The new qualifications begin development now, but they don't come in until 2032. So for this curriculum framework, that means from June onwards, we have time for everyone who's not been involved in those groups to engage with it, to feed back, to give their views. Now I'm going to slip on a couple of slides. Oops, I've gone too many. So this is slide 22 in the pack before I come back and do the sum up. This is a horrible slide, but it's useful to see all the work. And the point I want to make is how we are trying to make sure we take account of all the policy and legislation that a curriculum should take account of. So we are establishing program reference groups. So they are at the top level there to guide us. We hope these groups can guide us in making sure that the work is looked through the lenses of all the policy and legislation areas that can and should influence the curriculum. One of those areas is in British Sign Language, and we've taken some steps, but we need to take some more. And my question is to colleagues on this call, would you be willing as a group or as individuals to be part of a reference group to give us commentary and feedback and be involved in the development over the next few months? As well as those reference groups, or to help us with those reference groups, we've developed a workbook. So all of the projects in the curriculum improvement cycle, so that's all of the curriculum areas, all the work on ethos, all the work on personal achievement, we are asking them to work through this workbook. So in the workbook, there is a section on BSL. And we are asking the groups to show us how BSL is informed in their thinking around the work that they're doing, so we can gather that evidence. The workbook also asks them to engage with the legislation and engage with the policy, and supports them to reflect on what else they need to do to take account of that legislation. It also asks the group, do they have any particular questions or a need for some professional learning about any of the particular themes that are there. And if colleagues who are interested in helping us through a reference group and forming a reference group for BSL, we would use the workbooks as a starting point, but it's also an opportunity for colleagues to come together with a focus on a particular curriculum area or a particular aspect of the guidance that they might want to be involved in or to influence. And that's my main question that I would like to pose, and and have some dialogue about today or at the next session or with time to feedback in between. What else do you need to know and would like to know? What other ways might we make sure that colleagues on this call are involved, colleagues you work with are involved, and your children and young people are involved? These are just my last slides to sum up. The main messages. This review started with a recommendation from the OECD. We are updating the curriculum to be clearer on the position of knowledge. It should help us have something that's truly 3 to 18 and address that problem that we have in secondary or the end of the BGE and the senior phase being very, very different experiences for young people. And it should help us make sure that cross-curricular themes like sustainability, equalities and social justice, careers education are properly embedded. In terms of what's happening now, the co-creation is underway. Those groups will begin to share their findings over the next few weeks. Maths was the first group to start. So look out for some emerging thinking of maths. That won't be the final documents. They won't look like what the final document will look like. What they're going to do is share some of their thinking. We'll have a draft framework available in June. And then 2 years to prepare. Okay, that's the end of my slides. Be guided by colleagues on the call. What's the best way to take questions or feedback? Is that to allow a bit of a break? And
what you're probably saying is you would take direction from this group as to the best way for them to move forward with a kind of collaborative way of working.
Absolutely right, Susan. And if that's easiest to have a regular meeting with a small group who would like to be involved, who could help us facilitate some involvement of children and young people, we'd really welcome that. We're really keen to make sure that we do that in a way that's guided by this group. Okay.
Avril has asked a question, Graham. She's asking if any deaf professional or deaf pupils have been involved with the curriculum feedback.
So I think we've done a bit of that, and it would be good to kind of cross-check names, but I think we could do a bit more. And I think I'd be really keen that we work with this group to explore how do colleagues on this group and colleagues you work with want to be involved? And is that about supporting participation in some of the co-design groups as one way? And ensuring we'll function as a reference group and that we've got a regular opportunity to feed into the review. And how do we amplify the perspectives of deaf children and young people? Did someone have their hand up there? I can't see the hands up now.
Miss Montgomery.
Miss Montgomery, hi.
Hi there. I think it's important for the likes of Avril and our team to be leading this with the schools and with our young deaf learners. It's very important to have these links and have these positive role models to support the children and guide them in what's the best for their future.
Thanks very much, Miss Montgomery, for coming in, and I'd be really keen that we look at that through the lens of positive role models as we get on to, you know, as the groups kind of get towards thinking about materials and resources and things like that, a real kind of opportunity there, as well as how those groups are facilitated and how hopefully we support children and young people to have their voice and their view. That's a really important point about all the curricular areas as well.
If we could bring in Lois and
Lois,
then answer Jennifer's question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with the comment that to involve BSL using deaf young people, BDA would be very well placed to help facilitate that. I was just wondering about the scope of the co-production with young people. We do support deaf children with all levels of hearing loss at the National Deaf Children's Society. So some of them won't be BSL users, but I just wanted to check with you if you are looking to consult with all deaf children, or you're specifically focusing on those that use BSL.
So that's a really good question, Lois, and thank you for that. We're kind of trying to refine our strategy for engaging with children and young people in the work. There's a few things planned. Scottish Government have commissioned a bit of work to engage with children and young people. We know we've got a lot already from Growing Up in School report, Ken Muir report, national discussion. So we really want to make sure we're not asking children the same questions again, or things we already know. A lot of what's being looked at in the review came from the messages in those reports about what children want to see in the curriculum. So we've started that, but we can't leave it until it's all done and then go back and say to children, is this what you wanted? So we're kind of looking at probably the early part of the new year as a good time when we've listened to children, done a bit of work to take that back to them. So part of that is the kind of Scottish Government curriculum framework. Part of that is through the kind of core groups, because that's all practitioners. Part of that is through the reference groups, and part of that is some that are kind of more targeted. We have got access to a number of schools, so there's, you know, kind of, I think, some good suggestions we've already had around how the adults who are involved in those kind of groups engage, and we've got, you know, representations from lots of different settings. I think what you're suggesting is kind of like do we pay a wee bit of attention to how we make sure children with all levels of hearing are involved in that? And I'd be really, really kind of keen to look at across all those bits. So in terms of the work Scottish Government are commissioning, and the organisations that are going out and leading that bit, there's probably a bit there that could help us with that. There's probably a bit around some of the kind of co-design days that we might do in January, about where we do those and making sure we approach schools and settings that could help us with that. So again, if that's something that we could plan together, we'd be keen for that. And I'd really like you to give us challenge on how we do that. I think the point in the chat, oh sorry, I was just going to say the point in the chat about young deaf school leavers is a really important one as well. And I wonder, is a next useful step to have a follow-up, and is the follow-up with to explore maybe just how we take some of these ideas forward together. And that might be a bit of discussion, a bit of emailing back and forward, and maybe trying to come together before the end of the year again, do we think?
Could try and coordinate that.
So if between, is it Susan, Beverly, Avril and me, do we try and coordinate a further session?
That's good.
Okay, and if there are, what would be really helpful if there are kind of questions that have come out of today, that people want a bit more information on, just to send those in so we can follow those up at that session. I was just going to say thank you very much. That's been really helpful points raised at the end there, and I'm looking forward to the next meeting and looking forward to making sure that you give us some good challenge as we go through the work. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.